Have you watched the first lecture in the series I'm calling Biblical Hebrew 101, a lecture on the Hebrew ALEF-BET? And if you did, are you interested in getting some practice with the material that you learned in that lecture? If you do, then this episode of The Apologetics is for you. Hi, this is Chris Date, and welcome to The Apologetics, where every other week I discuss a wide variety of theological issues and show how a properly biblical worldview can help defend the historic Christian faith from its critics. Join me as we think through what we believe and why we believe it, and not something else. If you haven't already watched the first lecture in Biblical Hebrew 101, Lecture 1 on the Hebrew ALEF-BET, then before you continue this episode, you should go back and watch that lecture. Or if you have not watched that lecture, but you already are very familiar with the Hebrew ALEF-BET, otherwise known as the Hebrew alphabet, then you can follow along in this episode if you find it useful, although I suspect that if that's you, you probably won't. This is going to be most beneficial to people who have who have watched the first lecture I did in the series and for whom Biblical Hebrew is relatively new. Now, if you are still watching, hopefully you are somebody who watched that lecture, and if so, you'll know that in this lecture we introduced you to the Hebrew ALEF-BET, the 22, 23, or 26, depending upon how you count them, consonants in the Hebrew ALEF-BET. We talked about some details, some categories of letters, and we're going to try and review some of that material today in the form of practice to hopefully help you develop something of a mastery of the content in that lecture. Okay? So we're going to begin with something of a knowledge check, a review of the details that I presented in that lecture. And here we're going to do something kind of like a fill in the blank for 8 or 10 questions that you should be able to answer fairly easily if you have spent some time studying the material that we covered in Lecture 1. So here is the first question, and we'll just go right through them. After I ask the question, I'll give you a few seconds to see if you can come up with the answer yourself, and then I'll reveal the answer so that this is as close to an interactive class time together as possible, given that this is a pre-recorded video and you're watching from somewhere in the world. All right, so this first question: what category of letters follows special rules and is named after the back of the throat where they're pronounced? Again, the question is, what category of letters follows special rules and is named after the back of the throat where these letters are pronounced? Do you know the answer? The answer is gutturals. Gutturals comes from a Latin word that refers to the back of the throat. What letter is not technically a guttural, but is treated as one and follows many of the rules applying to gutturals? Again, the question is, what letter is not technically a guttural, but is treated as one and follows many of the rules applying to them? The answer is the Hebrew letter resh. Resh. Next question: what mnemonic or memory device refers to the category of letters that have a dot in them at the beginning of a word? Again, the question is, what mnemonic refers to the category of letters that have a dot in them at the beginning of a word? The answer is Begad Kafat. Begad Kafat. Remember, the consonants in the English mnemonic Begad Kafat each correspond to a consonant in the Hebrew ALEF-BET. And you can go and rewatch the first lecture if you need a refresher on which consonants those English consonants correspond to. The next question is, what is the name of the dot that hardens the otherwise soft sounds of Begad Kafat consonants? So remember, we just asked, we've identified this as the category of letters that takes a special dot when they appear at the beginning of a word, and that dot hardens the otherwise soft sounds of these consonants. What is the name of that dot? The answer is dagesh-lena, meaning weak emphasis. Or if you really want to impress modern Hebrew speakers, you might call it the dagesh kal, dagesh kal. What do you call the versions of certain consonants when they appear differently at the ends of words? So remember, in lecture 1, I introduced you to a category of consonants that appears differently at the ends of words than elsewhere in words. Do you remember what we call those versions of those consonants? They're called final forms, as distinct from their medial forms. How is a consonant pronounced and or transliterated differently when it appears in its final form? Again, how is a consonant pronounced and or transliterated differently when it appears in its final form? The answer is no differently. So this was a bit of a trick question. The final forms, if you'll recall, are neither pronounced nor transliterated differently than their corresponding medial forms. Which consonants are often said to be silent but do in fact produce a sound? Again, which consonants are often said to be silent but do in fact produce a sound? There are two of them. Do you remember what they are? They are Aleph and Ayin. Aleph and Ayin. And what is that sound? Not silence, but what is that sound produced by these letters? What sound is produced by the letters Aleph and Ayin? You'll recall, hopefully, that sound is called a glottal stop. It's that very brief stop in breath when you say apple, apple. If you do say apple instead of the proper an apple. So apple, that brief momentary stop in breath is called a glottal stop, and that's the sound produced by these letters. Which letters do modern Hebrew speakers pronounce differently than biblical Hebrew grammars often teach? Including the grammar upon which this lecture series is based, the Basics of Biblical Hebrew, 2nd edition by Pratico and Van Pelt. Which letters do modern Hebrew speakers pronounce differently than that grammar and many others teach? The answer is, and here I'm going to use the pronunciation offered by the grammars, the answer is wa and ta. Ta without a dagesh, that is. With a dagesh, modern Hebrew speakers pronounce it the same as the grammars recommend pronouncing the ta. But without a dagesh, modern Hebrew speakers pronounce ta differently than your grammars suggest, and they speak wa, or they pronounce wa differently than the grammars suggest. How do modern Hebrew speakers typically pronounce these two letters? Again, how do modern Hebrew speakers pronounce these two letters, wa and ta? They pronounce the first like the V in vine rather than a W. In fact, they refer to this character, to this consonant, as vav rather than wa. And the other one, the tav, or they call it a tav, not a ta or tau. The tav they pronounce like the T in toy, not like the TH in thin. Now that's not to say that you can't pronounce the vav like a W, and it's not to say that you can't pronounce the tav without a dagesh as a TH. You can, but just be aware that you will be pronouncing it differently than modern Hebrew speakers do, and if you choose at some point to study conversational Hebrew to some degree, you may find yourself speaking significantly differently, at least with these characters, than the rest of modern Hebrew speakers do. And just as a reminder, throughout this lecture series, I refer to these as Vav and Tav, not Wow and Tau. Which two letters are identical in appearance except for a small dot on the top left or top right? Again, which two letters are identical in appearance except for a small dot on the top left or top right? The answer is sin and shin. And I've put the character without the dot in parentheses next to it. So both the sin and the shin look like this character. The only difference is that one of them has a dot above the left tail or wing, or whatever you want to call that, the tine of the fork, the left tine on the fork and the right tine of the fork. Those are where the dots go to differentiate the sin from the shin. Now, on which side is the dot in the letter sin? All right, so again, sin and shin are identical. They both look like this three-tined fork in the parentheses. One of them has a dot on the top right, and the other has a dot on the top left. So on which side of this character is the dot in the letter sin? The answer is on the left side. And if you'll recall, in that lecture, I gave you this mnemonic to help you remember. The sun sets in the west. The word sun starts with the sound s, which is the sound produced by sin, and we associate the direction west with the direction left, and so the sun sets in the west can help you remember that the dot on the sin goes on the left. All right, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to do some Hebrew flashcard practice with you. All right? So what we're going to do is switch over to my Quizlet flashcards that I shared with you in at the end of the first lecture. I've got the flashcards shuffled and open in a browser, which you can see here embedded in the middle of my PowerPoint slide. And we'll just go through them together and see if you can offer as much detail about the consonant as possible before I do. The main thing here that you'll want to be able to do as we go through these flashcards together is identify the name of the letter and the sound it makes. Ideally, though, you will be able to go on to identify what it is transliterated, how it's transliterated into English, and also identify any categories, any one of those three categories I told you about that the consonant falls within. So here, for example, it's been on the screen for a few seconds now. What consonant do you think this is? And I'll say this at risk of giving away the answer for this first one, knowing that you've now had it on your screen for a bit. But I have, in these flashcards, I have separated out the individual, each form of the characters that have final forms. In other words, if you have a character with a medial form and a final form, those are two different flashcards in this series. All right, so keep that in mind as we go through these. Which means, as you can see in the top left corner of the embedded window there, there are 37 in cards in this series, not just 22, 23, 26, and that's in part because of this splitting up of the medial and final forms. So now that I've had it up on the screen for a while, can you tell me what consonant this is on your screen? This is the final form of the character of the consonant nun. Nun makes a sound like the N, the English N, in the word nice or Nancy or new, etc. It is transliterated using the English letter N, and it falls in the category of final forms. consonants that take final forms. So let's see if I got all of that right. Name, this is a final noon. The pronunciation is N as in now. That's like what I said. The transliteration is N, and the category is final forms. All right? So again, that's noon. How about this one? What consonant do you think this is? I'll give you a second to think about it. Remember, we're looking for at least the name and sound of the consonant, but if you can also give me the transliteration and any categories it falls into, that would be helpful for you. And now that this has been in front of your eyes for a few seconds, I'll go ahead and start walking through the answer, or answers. This is the letter tsadi, and it makes the sound at the beginning of that name. Tsadi, that TS sound that you would find at the end of the word boots. This is transliterated using the English letter S with a dot under it to distinguish it from other sounds that are transliterated using the S. And this falls into the category of letters that take final forms. So let's see here. Tsadi, TS and boots, S with a dot under it, final forms. So yay me! I should hope I get these. All right, next consonant. I'll give you a few seconds to think about what consonant this is. Again, you're looking primarily for name and sound, but also, if you can, transliteration and categories. Take another moment. Sorry, by the way, that I could not easily make these characters larger. This is just the way that my browser renders the Quizlet website. Before next review session after lecture 2, I will hopefully have figured out a better way to get these to appear larger on your screen. All right, now that you've had a few seconds, I'll answer this. This is the letter hey. It makes the sound of the English H in the word hat or hop, etc. It's transliterated using the English letter H, and this falls into the category of letters called gutturals. Hey, H is in hey, H is the transliteration, category gutturals. All right? Next one. Take a moment. I'll give you another couple of seconds. Okay. This is the letter tet. Tet. This makes the sound of the letter T in toy. This letter is transliterated using the English letter T with a dot under it. And there is no special category that this letter falls under. Got it right. Good. Hopefully you did too. Next character. This one might be a little tricky. I'll give you a hint that this looks an awful lot... Well, the hint I was about to give you would have given it away. I'll give you this hint, though. This is not the letter Dalet. This is not the letter Dalet. You figured it out? This is the letter Kaf, but it's the final form of the letter Kaf. Lacking the Dagesh, as the final form always will, the letter Kaf makes the sound roughly of the CH in Bach or in Loch in Scottish, but it's wetter and meatier, dirtier, rougher than that sound. It's more like clearing your throat. And in fact, this letter is often pronounced in songs not as Kaf, like it is with the Dagesh, but as Chaf, because it lacks the Dagesh. It's transliterated using a K with a line with a line over the top of the K. And this is in two categories. This is in the category of begad kafat consonants, meaning this is one of the characters that can take a doggish lena at the beginning of a word or in the middle of a word after a vowel sound. And this is in the category of letters that take final forms. Kaf, final kaf specifically, CHs and Bach, really clearing the throat. K with a line under it. I think I probably said K with a line over it. I meant under it. It can go over or under. It depends on whether the character extends below the baseline or not. In the case of K, it does not go into the baseline, so they put the line under it. But if this were a P or a G, then the line would go over the top, rather than under the bottom. And then, as I said, this is in the categories of begad kafats and final forms. Next character. I think I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit because I think we might be spending a little bit too long on each card. But I'll still give you one more second. All right. This is the letter P. This makes the sound of the English letter P in the word pay or pop or puddle, etc. This is, for that reason, transliterated using the English letter P because it has a doggesh in it. It is just the English letter P that it's transliterated as, not with a line over it. And this is in the category, this is actually there are two categories this falls in. It falls under the category of begad kafat consonants that take a doggish lena at the beginnings of words and in the middle of words right after, not vowel sounds I said earlier, but consonant sounds. And it's in the category of letters that take final forms. But this isn't its final form. All right, so P is in pastor, transliteration P, and this is in both begad kafats and final forms. Next character, what is this? Take a moment. This is the letter Gimel. Gimel. It makes the sound of the English letter G in green or gob or goofy, etc. It is transliterated using the English letter G, but with no line over it because the doggesh is in it. And because I've mentioned the doggesh, you know this is in the category of begad kafats. Okay. Next consonant. This is not the hey. It looks very similar. We already saw the hey earlier in the flashcards. But the difference is that the hey had a break, a space between the left leg and the top, whereas this letter does not. And this letter is chet. Chet. It makes that sound, the same sound that kaf without a doggesh makes. So CH and Bach, but rougher. And it's transliterated using an H with a dot under it to distinguish it from the hey. And it is in the category known as gutturals. Chet, CH and Bach, H with a dot under it, gutturals. Okay? Next letter. One small hint, we have in a sense seen this letter earlier in our flashcards. This is the letter kaf, or as it is sometimes sung, chaf, because this is a kaf without a doggesh. Without a doggesh, the kaf makes that sound of the CH in Bach, but rougher. The throat clearing sound. That's why when this is sung as an individuated letter from kaf, it's named chaf. And so that's the sound it makes, that throat clearing sound. It is transliterated using the letter K with line under it, just like the one we saw earlier. But the difference between this one and that one is that that last one was the final form and this one is the medial form. So that tells you that this is in two categories. One, the begot kafats, because I mentioned that this is lacking a dagesh. And two, it's in the category of final forms, because as we saw earlier, there is a final form of the letter kaf. So kaf, ch and bach, k with a line under it, begot kafats, final forms. Okay, next category, or sorry, next consonant. I'll give you a hint. Not a great one. This is not a final kaf, a final kaf. We had the final kaf earlier in the flashcards. This is not the final kaf, final kaf. This is the letter dalet. It makes the, when it lacks a dagesh, like it does here, it makes the sound of the English letter D in the word dog. Actually, in modern Hebrew, it makes that same sound, even with a dagesh, but here we're dealing with it without the dagesh. It's transliterated as the English letter D with a line under it when it lacks the dagesh, as it does here. And it is in the category of consonants called begot kafats, because it can take a dagesh lane at the beginning of a word and in the middle of the word immediately following a consonant sound. Okay. Actually, yeah. Okay. So yeah, dalet, D as in day, D with a line under it, category begot kafats. Next consonant. This is the letter gimel. Gimel, which we saw earlier, except now it lacks the dagesh. So, and whether it has a dagesh or not, the gimel is pronounced like the G in God. Without the dagesh, it is transliterated as a G with a line above it. And this is in the category of begot kafats. Gimel, G as in God, G with a line over it, begot kafats. Next consonant. This is the letter Aleph. Aleph. It is, the sound that it makes is a glottal stop. It's transliterated using no English letter because a glottal stop corresponds to no English letter. Instead, it's transliterated with a rightward pointing apostrophe-like symbol. And by rightward pointing, I mean that its curved edge, its convex edge, is facing to the right. And this is in the category known as gutturals. Aleph, glottal stop, rightward pointed apostrophe, and gutturals. Next consonant. It's really hard to see, possibly on your screen, because this is a very small letter. But this is, and it's not an apostrophe, it kind of looks like one. No, this is the letter Yod. The Yod makes the sound of the English Y in yellow. It is transliterated using the English letter Y, and it is in no special category of letters. Okay. Next up. This is the letter ayin. It's pronounced as a glottal stop, which means it uses one of those apostrophe-like symbols to transliterate it, but instead of pointing to the right, like the transliteration of Aleph, this is transliterated using an apostrophe-like symbol that points to the left, meaning it's curved or convex, curved outward or convex edges pointing to the left. and this is in the category of gutturals as well, along with Aleph. Ayin, glottal stop, leftward pointed apostrophe, gutturals. Next up, and be careful with this one. This one's easily mistaken for another letter. This is the letter Shin. Shin. It makes the sound of SH in the English word shin or shoot. It's transliterated using the English letter S with a downward pointing caret over it. And it is in no category of letters. Okay. Next up. This is the letter BET, or when it's individuated, Dagesh versus no Dagesh, as it is in some songs, some alphabet songs, ALEF-BET songs, you would call it VET. And that gives you an indication that because this lacks a Dagesh, it is pronounced like the letter V in vine, V. But it's transliterated using the English letter B, because this is the BET, and the BET is transliterated using the English letter B. But because there's no Dagesh here, it's the letter B has a line under it in transliteration. And because I've explained that this makes a different sound with or without with a Dagesh than without it, you know this is a Begad Kafatz consonant. Okay. Next up, here we go. This is the one consonant in Hebrew ALEF-BET that extends above the top of the imaginary frame in which Hebrew consonants appear. This is the letter Lamed. It makes the sound of the letter L in lose or love, etc. It's transliterated using an English letter L, and it is in no category, no special category of consonant. Next up. This one kind of looks like a tet, which I think we covered earlier, but this is not a tet. Note the opening in the bottom left-hand corner. This is the letter Mem. Mem. And it makes the sound of the letter M in mother or mop, and it's transliterated using the letter M. And the only category that this letter is in, the only special category, is the final forms letters. So this takes a final form, but this is its medial form. Okay. Next up. So how about this? What category of letters is this? What are these letters that we're looking at here? We have seen 2 or 3 of these already, and these are the final forms. Next up. Now be careful with this one. This is easily confused with one other letter. The difference is at the top. The other letter looks a little bit different. It only has a little tail curving off to the left, whereas this also extends to the right at the top. So this is the Hebrew letter Zayin, and Zayin makes the sound of the letter Z in zebra or Zion. Zion is in Jerusalem. And it's transliterated using the English letter Z, and it is in no special category of letter. Next up. This is the Hebrew letter Reish, or Reish, as you might say if you're very Americanized. Reish. I'm still working on my pronunciation. Remember that with the reish, the R sound isn't up toward the front of your tongue, it's in the back. Reish, reish. The reish, well, that's the sound it makes. It's that back of the throat R sound, back of the tongue R sound, for which reason it's transliterated using the English letter R. And although this is not technically a guttural, it is in the category of consonants called gutturals because it acts the same as gutturals do in a number of cases. Reish R, R, gutturals. Next. This is the letter tsadi, but this is its final form. So like tsadi in its medial form, which we've already seen, this makes the sound of the TS in the word boots, or at the beginning of tsunami. It is transliterated using the English letter S with a dot under it, and this is in the category of letters that take final forms. Next up. This is the Hebrew letter mem. Mem or mem, if you're saying it really fast. Mem. It makes the sound of M in mother. It is transliterated using an M, whether it's in its medial form or its final form, as it is here. And this is in the category of letters that take final forms. Next up. We saw almost an identical letter earlier, but in that earlier case, the dot was on the top right. Here, it's on the top left. Remember, the sun sets in the west is how you know this is the letter sin. Sin. Makes the sound of the S in sin. It's transliterated using the English letter S with an acute accent over it. An acute accent is one that extends up and to the right. And this is in no special category of letters. Next up. Now this looks almost identical to the final form of a letter that we saw earlier. In fact, I think it was our very first one. But this is not that letter. This is not the medial form of that letter. It's also easily confused for another letter that we saw earlier. In that earlier letter, the top extended not only to the left, but also to the right, whereas here it's only extending to the left. And this is the letter Vav. Your textbook, your grammars will say this makes the sound of the letter W. Moderns pronounce it like the letter V in vine. It is transliterated using a W, and it is in no special category of letters. Next up. This is the letter Taf with a dagesh, which means, and this would be true even if it didn't have a dagesh, at least in modern Hebrew pronunciation, but this is pronounced with like the letter T in top or toy. It is transliterated using a T, and it is in the category of letters that take a dagesh lena, which is the begad kafats. Next up. Well, the shuffling makes this kind of a coincidence that we are following tav with a dagesh, with tav without a dagesh. So this is, again, your grammars will tell you this is pronounced like the th in thin, but if you want to pronounce this the way that modern Hebrew speakers do, it's pronounced just as it is with a dagesh, which is the t in toy. It is transliterated using the English letter T, but this one, like other letters that take a dagesh, but without a dagesh, it has a line under the T when it's transliterated. So with a dagesh, it's letter T. Without a dagesh, it's a T with a line under it. And this is in the category of letters called begad kafats. Okay, so what category of letters are all of these? What category of letters contains these 4 or 5 letters? One of them, the first one, resh, is not typically one, or not technically one, but it is treated as one. These are the gutturals. Next up, back to individual letters. This is the letter Pe, or because it's lacking a dagesh, some songs will treat this letter separately as the letter Fe. It is without a dagesh, like it is here. It's pronounced like the ph in alphabet. It is transliterated using a p, but with a line over it, just like all begad kafats consonants are when they don't have a dagesh. And it is in the category, 2 categories. One category, the begad kafats consonants. The other one is ones that take a final form. But this is its medial form. Home stretch here. Here again, the shuffling has done us something of a disservice, possibly. I'm trying to stretch out my talking here before, to give you a moment to identify the letter, which hopefully you've done by now. This is the final form of the letter that we just saw. So this again is the letter Pe. It is pronounced like the ph in alphabet when it doesn't have a dagesh lena, and it doesn't have a dagesh lena here. The final form will never have a dagesh lena. At least I don't think so. That'll be, if you find out that I'm wrong about that, let me know. This is transliterated using the P, the English letter P, with a line over it because it doesn't have a dagesh lena. And this is in 2 categories. It's in the category of begad kafats characters, and it's in the category of characters that take final forms. Okay. Next up. This is the letter samech. The letter samech makes the sound of the English letter S in sun or slap, etc. This is the only letter that makes an S sound or something like it that is transliterated as nothing but the English letter S. You recall that Sadi, Sin, and Sheen are all transliterated using the letter S as well, but they have different marks above or beneath those S's. This is the one consonant that makes an S sound that is transliterated as nothing but the English letter S, and it is in no special categories. Next up. We have seen 2, I think, other forms of this consonant in this flashcard series. This is the letter kaf. It has a dagesh lena in it, so it is pronounced like the letter K in kipper, or why can I not think of any word? Kite. It is transliterated using the English letter K. And this is in 2 categories, one of them being begad kafats, the other one being final forms. King is the word that I was looking for. Next up. This is the letter Dalet. Dalet. It has a dagesh in it, so it's pronounced like the letter D in dog, but in modern Hebrew, it's pronounced the same way with or without a dagesh. Because it does have the dagesh, it's transliterated as the English letter D, and this is in the category of letters known as Gad Kafats. Next up. This is the letter Kof. It makes the sound of the letter K in king, but it's transliterated using the English letter Q, and this is in no special category. Next up. All right, now this one is one we have seen earlier, but in a different form. And this should not be confused with either Vav or Zayin, both of which we've seen earlier as well. Both of those look similar to this one on the top, but not on the bottom. This is the letter Nun, but this is its medial form rather than its final form, which is the form that we saw earlier. The letter Nun is pronounced like the letter N in now or nope, and it's transliterated using the English letter N, and this is in the category of letters that take final forms. Next up, this is obviously not one character. This is all the 6 characters that fall in the category of the Gad Kafats, letters that take a dagesh lena. And finally, one last consonant before we move on to the last part of our practice today. This is the letter Bet. Bet. Because it has a dagesh lena in it, it is pronounced like the B in boy or Bible. If it didn't, it would be pronounced like the letter V. It is transliterated using the letter B in English, and because it has a dagesh, it has the transliteration has no markings around it. It's just the letter D, and this is in the category of letters that take dagesh lena in some cases, known as Begad Kafats. All right, so there's our flashcard practice. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's move on to the last part of our practice today. What we're going to do is go through the workbook exercises for the chapters in Basics of Biblical Hebrew that we covered in Lecture 1, and in this case, the only chapter was Chapter 1. You can find the workbook in paperback at Amazon, probably Kindle as well. I have it in Logos. So let's go ahead and pull up Logos here. Now, up here are places to draw, to write the letters. We obviously don't need to do that here. If I had a nice digital pen and pad type of thing, I might show you how to draw them. But we're in a digital age now, and you'll probably do more typing than writing, which is why I encourage you to learn how to type in Hebrew. Maybe I'll, and I do indeed plan to do a video on typing in Hebrew soon. But we're going to skip ahead to this question, which says, write out in order and from right to left the 23 consonants of the Hebrew alphabet. Insert a dagesh lena into the Begad Kafat letters. All right, so I'm going to do some typing now, and I'll try to go a little bit slowly so that you can get ahead of me. But first up is ALEF-BET. Sorry about the font of these. I can't help it. It's Logos, not PowerPoint, so I don't have control over the font. And it's a field. It's a typing field in the workbook. So ALEF-BET Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, chet, tet, yod, kaf, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, or Mem, Nun, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin. I think it's Pei is next. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei. Tzadi. Kof. Reish. Sin. Shin. Taf. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi, Kof, Reish, Sin, Shin, Taf. Or, if you treat the Begad consonants individually, like they are, like is often done in songs, then it's Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Chaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei, Fei, Tzadi, Kof, Reish, Sin, Shin, Tav, Taf. All right, give the final form of the following Hebrew consonants. So this is the consonant Kaf. And in the final form, the Kaf looks like a Dalet, but the bottom of the line, the line extends down below the baseline. So it looks like roughly like this. Again, excuse the font. The Mem looks similar in its final form, but it's a closed box rather than an open one, and the top is square, so it looks like that. The Nun, imagine just the bottom tail of the Nun being folded down so that it extends, so that the tail of the thing extends down below the baseline. Another way to think of it is like a Vav that extends down below the baseline, so it looks like that. The Pei, similarly, you can imagine the bottom tail of the Pei being folded down and extending down below the baseline. The top looks the same, so it looks like that. The Tzadi is very similar in its final form as well. You just kind of take that bottom part that, you know, is kind of folded in half and you unfold it so that it goes down below the baseline. So it looks something like that. List the 4 Hebrew consonants that are called gutturals. It's saying the 4. I'm going to add the 5th at the end that is sometimes, very often, treated like a guttural. These are the letters Aleph, Hey, Chet, and Ayin. And then, very often treated like a guttural is the letter Reish. All right, give the names and transliterate each of the following pairs of Hebrew consonants. So in the first example, they've already completed it for us. It's Beit and Kaf, both of them without Dagesh in it, and so they are transliterated with the line under, the English letter. So this is Gimel, and it's transliterated using a G, and Nun, which is transliterated with an N. This is Hey, which is transliterated with an H, and Chet, or Chet, depending on how you want to spell it. There is no official English spelling of Chet, and that's pronounced with an H, but with a dot under it. This is also Chet, so it's an H with a dot under it. And Taf, without a Dagesh in it. So that is pronounced like the letter T with a line under it, because it doesn't have a Dagesh. This is the letter Dalet, and it does not have a Dagesh in it, so that's D with a line under it. And Nun, but it's the final form of Nun, and it's transliterated using an N. Let's scroll down a little bit. This next one here, this is firstly Mem. It's the final form of it, and Mem is transliterated using M. And then next to it is samech, which is transliterated with the letter S. These next two are sin and shin, but it's in opposite order in the way that it's listed to the left. So the one on the left, because the dot is on the right, is shin, which is transliterated using a letter S with a downward pointed caret over it, and sin, which is the letter S in transliteration, but with a acute angle. I gotta find out where on my transliteration keyboard, there it is, S with a acute accent over it. Did I say acute angle a moment ago? I think I did. All right, these are both glottal stops. The first one, the one on the left, is the letter ALEF, which is transliterated using a rightward pointed apostrophe-like symbol, and the one on the right is ayin, which is transliterated using a leftward pointed apostrophe-like symbol. Next one down, the letter on the left is tet, which is transliterated using the T, but with a dot under it. And the one on the right is tav, but with a dagesh in it, which means it's transliterated with the letter T and with no line under it. Unlike above, where we had tav here, because that one didn't have a dagesh, we did put a line under the transliteration. Here, the letter on the left is kaf, and it has a dagesh in it, so we transliterate with a K. The one next to it is kof, which is transliterated using the letter Q. Next one down, the letter on the left is samech, which is S in transliteration. And the next one over, remember, sun sets in the west, so, and the dot is on the left, so we know that's the one that makes the S sound, which is the letter sin, which, recall, is transliterated with an S and an acute accent over it. These next ones are tzadi on the left, and this is transliterated using the English letter S, but with a dot under it. And the letter on the right is the guttural that produces a glottal stop called ayin, which, as we saw earlier, is transliterated with a leftward pointed apostrophe-like symbol. These characters, the one on the left is dalet, which, and because there's no dagesh, we need to put a line under the transliteration, which is the English letter D. And then when the letter on the right is reish, which is transliterated using the letter R. This one here, the letter on the left is vav, which is transliterated using the letter W. And the one on the right is zayin, which is transliterated using the letter Z. And then finally in this section, the letter on the left is again vav, which is transliterated using a W. And then on the right is the final form of the letter nun, which is transliterated using the letter N. Transliterate the following Hebrew nouns and proper names for which only the consonants have been given. The first word has been transliterated by way of example. Okay, so this first word is eved. You don't need to worry about the vowels right now, but the ayin, beit, and dalet are transliterated there. I'm going to go a little bit faster through this section since we have now practiced transliteration together. This is the word Adam, and the Aleph is transliterated using a rightward pointing apostrophe-like symbol. The dalet without a dagesh is transliterated using a D with a line under it, and the mem is transliterated using the letter M. This is the word eretz, meaning earth. Again, we need a rightward pointed apostrophe, we need an R, and we need a S with a dot under it for the tzadi. This word is zahav, which means gold. The zayin is transliterated Z, the hey is transliterated H, and the beit without a dagesh is transliterated with a B and a line under it. This word is the word kesef, means silver or money. The kaf with a dagesh in it is transliterated with a K. The samech is transliterated with an S, and the final form of pay, because it doesn't have a dagesh in it, is transliterated with a P and a line over the P. This is tzaddik, tzedek, which means righteousness. The tzadi is transliterated with an S that has a dot under it. The dalet without a dagesh lena is transliterated with a D with a line under it, and the kof is transliterated Q. This is the word, it's either chadash or chodesh. The vowels aren't there, and I'm not sure I remember quite what those vowels are. That's why I'm not sure what the pronunciation is. The chet is transliterated with an H that has a dot under it. The dalet without a dagesh is transliterated with a D having a line under it, and the shin is transliterated with an S and a downward pointed caret. This is the word davar, which means word or thing or matter. The dagesh in the dalet means the dalet is transliterated just D. The lack of a dagesh in the next character, beit, means that we have to transliterate with a line under the B, and the reish is transliterated R. The word shofet, meaning judge, has a sheen at the beginning, so again we need an S with a downward pointed caret. A pay that does not have a dagesh in it, so we need to put a line over the P, and the tet is the letter T with a dot under the T. What I'm guessing is mishkan or mushkan, mishkan or something like that. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with the word to know how it's pronounced without the vowel markings. This is the letter mem at the beginning, sheen, kaf with a dagesh, and final nun. Avraham, this is the letter aleph, and then beit without a dagesh, and rish, and hey, and final mem. This is Yisrael. So the yod is Y, the sin is S with an acute accent, the reish is R, the aleph is a rightward pointed apostrophe-like symbol, and the lamed is L. This is the word melech, meaning king. The mem is an M, the lamed is an L, and the final kaf, because it doesn't have a dagesh, is K with a line under the K. Road or way is derech. The dalet has a dagesh, so we don't put a line under the D. The reish is transliterated R, and the final kaf, lacking a dagesh, is transliterated with a K and a line under it. Finally, malach is the word messenger. The mem is transliterated M, the lamed L, the aleph rightward pointed apostrophe-like symbol, and final kaf, K with a line under it. And then as you can see, the next chapter is on vowels, which we will be covering in the next lecture. So that's it. We've spent time today going over some of the details that I presented in my introduction to Biblical Hebrew in this first lecture, and then we went through a series of flashcards to see how we're doing recognizing the Hebrew ALEF-BET, and we finally went through a number of workbook exercises in the workbook for the grammar upon which this lecture series is based, which again is Basics of Biblical Hebrew, 2nd edition. Hopefully this has been helpful, and hopefully helps you to sort of master a little bit more some of what you have been practicing, hopefully a little bit, since that first lecture. Coming up next in the series Biblical Hebrew 101 will be a lecture on chapters 2 and 3 of Basics of Biblical Hebrew, in which we will introduce the Hebrew vowels and some other things. But until then, thank you for joining me today. Hope it has been helpful, and shalom. I've been your host, Chris Date, and thanks so much for watching The Apologetics, where we think together through what we believe, why we believe it, and not something else. If you've enjoyed this episode, please click the thumbs up, like icon, the subscribe button, and the bell icon to receive notifications when new videos are streamed or uploaded. Either way, come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of The Apologetics, streaming live on YouTube every other Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Until then...